Alright, so for problem number 2, on page 402, you have to find the area of the shaded region. So you see that the top function is 1/2 secant squared t, and the bottom function, the lower function, is -4 sine squared t. So hopefully your setup looks something like this. And this is the same as integrating -pi/3, or from -pi/3 to +pi/3 of 1/2 secant squared t plus 4 sine squared t dt. And then using more properties for integration, we can separate this to 1/2 secant squared t. So the integral of 1/2, I'll put that outside, from -pi/3 to +pi/3 of secant squared t dt, plus, and then same thing with 4 sine squared t. I can take the 4 out, times the integral from -pi/3 to +pi/3 of sine squared t. Okay, so hopefully this left part, so I guess in this somewhat binomial looking thing, because it's attached with a plus, the first part is easy to do, easy to integrate. It's just 1/2, and then integrating secant squared t is just tangent from -pi/3 to +pi/3 plus. Now this left part, we're going to go ahead and use some of the same formulas from the last video I made, and it's the power reducing formula, where we can go ahead and change this to integral from -pi/3 to +pi/3 of 1 minus cosine of 2t over 2 dt. Okay, so I'm just going to keep carrying this 1/2 tangent t. Now, before I do any u substitution, I'm going to break this to 1/2 minus cosine of 2t. So 4 times the integral from -pi/3 to pi/3 of 1/2 minus cosine of 2t over 2 dt. And again, I'm just going to carry this over, keep carrying it over. And this is 4. Now, when I separate the integral of 4 times -pi/3 to +pi/3 of 1/2 minus cosine of 2t, this 4 will be attached to both of them. Okay, so we just have 1/2 tangent of t. And if some of you guys are thinking, I just compute this, save myself the trouble of rewriting it, you can do that. It's just the way I'm choosing to do it, I guess. I can now integrate this. This is 4 times 1/2 t from -pi/3 to +pi/3. And now this I can kind of take out that 1/2 to make it 4/2. So take out this 2 and make it 4/2 outside, so that I only have cosine of 2t dt. This is where we'll do the u substitution, just like we did it in my last video. So some of you guys might even want to jump steps if you remember how to do this from the last video. And when you take out this 1/2, 4/2 is going to be 2, and then 2 times the 1/2 will be 1. Okay, so what I have here is 1/2 tangent t from negative pi/3 positive pi/3 plus 4 1/2 t negative pi/3 pi/3 minus, now that's 2 times 1/2, that's this 1/2, and this is cosine of u dt now. So integrating cosine u is a lot easier than the mess that we had before that. Now this is just going to be 1. We don't have to write it. And integrating cosine u is going to be sine. And I'm going to go ahead and plug in that u is equal to 2x. And now it's time to start plugging in each of these limits, negative pi/3, positive pi/3, for each function here using the fundamental theorem of calculus. So now I have 1/2 of tangent of positive pi/3 minus tangent of negative pi/3 plus 4 of 1/2 pi/3 minus negative pi/3 minus, and then this is sine of 2 pi/3 minus sine of negative 2 pi/3. Okay. So I have tangent of pi/3 is radical 3 minus tangent of negative radical 3 is just negative radical 3. Now this is pi/6 plus pi/3. Okay, and I actually forgot a 1/2. This is actually 1/2 here, so that's going to be 1/2 here, so that's going to be pi/6. It should work out nicer. Now, sine of 2 pi over 3 is going to be negative radical, no, this is going to be positive radical 3/2 minus, and then on the negative side, it'll be negative radical 3/2. Okay, so this is going to be 2 radical 3 times the 1/2. I'm going to keep this as 2 radical 3 over 2. This is going to be 4 times, and then this is going to be now 2 pi over 6. And what I'm going to do here is, this is going to be negative radical 3 over 2 plus, this is plus, but when I distribute the negative, it's going to be negative radical 3 over 2. So what I have is 2 radical 3 over 2 plus 4, and you guys can see how that's going to simplify already. And there's going to be this minus 2 radical 3 over 2, and things cancel out to get 4 times 2 pi over 6, which will simplify to 4 pi